All right, great. So now let's officially get started. Thanks everyone for your patience and apologies for the technical difficulties. Technology is amazing and also sometimes doesn't work for us. So let's go ahead and get started. You probably have figured out already that you can use both a telephone line or your computer speakers to hear, whichever one works better for you. There's the number if you want to try the telephone. You can chat your questions at the bottom, and the recording will be made available as well as the slides from this presentation to everyone who RSVP'd, and it will be up on our website tomorrow at the latest, possibly this evening. So I didn't say, I'm Caitlin Saposi-Belknap. I'm National Director of Move to Amend, and I'm here in Eureka, California, our office. I've got our office cat sitting behind me. And I also wanted to introduce Shara Smith. Shara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so hello everyone. My name is Shara Smith, and I'm the Director of Outreach and Development for Move to Amend. Great to be here.
Great. Shara's in New Hampshire, so we're literally coast to coast. So Shara's going to start us off with some background on Move to Amend because I think we have some new folks here, and actually I wanted to do a quick poll just to get a sense of who's in the room. So let me stick this up on the screen, and if you could respond to the poll to give all of us a sense of who's here. Give it a minute to tally up. All right. So it looks like about half of you are involved with an affiliate in some way, and then the other half of you are brand new. And then there's a few of you who volunteer in other capacities. So excellent. That's kind of what we expected. So we're going to do a little bit of background for the new folks, and it doesn't hurt to hear it again. We'll briefly go through this, and then we'll get into Pledge to Amend. So I'm going to hand it over to Shara.
Great, thank you, Caitlin, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the call tonight. I wanted to start off by just giving a little bit of background on the Move to Amend Coalition. It was established in 2009, and it started out as just a handful of concerned citizens preparing for the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which affirmed that money is free speech through the previously established doctrine of corporate personhood. And fast forward to today, the coalition has expanded to include over 360,000 people across the country, as well as a host of organizations committed to social and economic ending corporate rule and building a vibrant society. In terms of our goals, we of course want to pass the We the People Amendment, which specifically addresses the issue of corporations being bestowed with rights under the Constitution. Our position is that constitutional rights are intended for human beings and not artificial entities. And also we'd like to abolish money as speech, which enables a system of corruption in our eyes. If money is speech, then those with more money have more speech, and those without money have no speech, etc. Our second goal is to build an organic grassroots movement aimed at making real the promise of American democracy, so not just democracy in theory, but democracy in practice. In terms of our strategy, we have built and continue to develop a grassroots democracy movement. As I mentioned, we have over 360,000 people who have signed our petition, a coalition that includes over 100 organizations. We are a broad and diverse movement. We are the only amendment organization that includes anti-racism and anti-oppression as part of its primary work. We're also about community organizing and not just activism, so not just getting people fired up about some short-term initiative and then having that fade away. We are building a movement, and we're in it for the long haul. So it's important that we focus on organizing because activism doesn't build power, organizing does. In addition to our strategies, we also have a focus on local organizing for two reasons. Number one, it's the most effective way to build relationships and influence elected officials. In addition to that, it is the best way to help people speak sort of face-to-face and effectively get support from individuals in your community, your neighbors, your friends, your family. Our structure, we have over 150 affiliate organizations across the country, 150 affiliates across the country, and that number is growing. Our hope actually is that through the Pledge to Amend, other affiliates will emerge in communities as well. We also have a national team that includes a small but mighty group of 5 staff, as well as our executive team of social movement leaders. In addition to that, we have 6 national committees that support our organizing efforts from a national perspective. And we also have, as I mentioned before, over 100 endorsing and partner organizations that are part of the coalition. Are there any questions about the history and background on Move to Amend? Okay. Great. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, who is going to share some details on the Pledge to Amend campaign.
Great. Thanks, Shara. So we're really excited to be launching Pledge to Amend, and I want to run through what it will entail and what the resources are that we have available. And if you have questions, type them along the way. If they're clarifying in nature, Shara might jump in and stop me. But if they're more substantive, then we'll take the questions at the end. So first of all, I want to frame out context for everyone. We sometimes talk about how this is a marathon, not a sprint. Doing something as monumental as amending the Constitution and addressing such a fundamental flaw in our power structure currently is big, and we understand that. We know that. And so we also know that that means that we have to pace ourselves and we have to be clear about where we are in the movement. So we see it as the phase that we're in building this movement is education and building power and capacity. And so while we will be targeting as part of Pledge to Amend, we need to be clear on what we're really trying to do. And so in this education and building power moment and phase, we need to be thinking about how can we conduct every action we're doing, and we need to hold Pledge to Amend to this standard as well, that ensures maximum public education and best builds our organizing power and capacity. And I really want to emphasize that power. So Pledge to Amend can work if you're just an individual going out and talking to candidates on your own, but it'll be much more effective if you form a group around you, and that group builds lasting power and infrastructure to carry on, because we know that the amendment isn't going to happen in November. There's going to still be work to do, and so we want to use this campaign as a way to build our capacity towards after Pledge to Amend to continue it on and work with whoever it is who is in office at that point. So our goal is to target candidates for local, state, and federal office to get their support on record for the We the People Amendment and make this whole issue that we're addressing something that's central to campaigns. And we're very intentional about not just targeting federal candidates. People think of an amendment and we think Congress, but it's important to remember that states are critical for ratifying an amendment regardless of ratification, or we ultimately realize that Congress is actually not going to do it, and we need the states to apply pressure through a constitutional convention, and then states still need to ratify it. So state legislators are key players no matter what when we're talking about amending the Constitution. And also, though, local officials, city council, county commissioners, but maybe even smaller offices as well are really important to remember too, for a couple reasons. One, it's easiest to reach those candidates And locally, those matter to people. And corporate personhood and money in politics is an issue that affects from the top down to the bottom. Every race potentially could be massively affected, and every community can be affected by corporate constitutional rights. So this isn't just a national issue. This is something that is relevant for local people who are going to be holding office. And in addition to that, the most likely people to become state office holders and members of Congress down the road are people who start off running for city council or smaller offices. And so we need to have a long-term game plan and be getting people early on, educating them about how critical this issue is and letting them know that if they want to move on to higher office, they need to take a position now and they need to be a leader now. So we're targeting anybody who's running for office. Some important things that we need to remember so that nobody gets into hot water is that there are some restrictions on how organizations like Move to Amend can participate in elections. So here is kind of a simple list of the things that you may do and you may not do. And our campaign is designed for you to do the things that we can do to stay in the clear, and the materials that we have for you will keep you in that May column. So you can conduct candidate forums as long as you invite all the candidates. You can ask questions at candidate forums because all the candidates will be there. So events held by other groups or by the community itself. You can encourage voter registration, of course. You can send educational information to all the candidates. You can support or oppose ballot initiatives, and that includes Move to Amend resolutions that are on the ballot. And you can prepare unbiased voter scorecards to show how legislators have voted and what people's positions are. Some of the things that you cannot do is show favoritism to one candidate or political party, target voter drives, get out the vote campaigns, or other efforts at only members of a particular party or in concert with only particular campaigns. You cannot provide support, either financial or in-kind, meaning time or other resources, to any political candidates, and you cannot coordinate efforts with a candidate or political party. So obviously what we're trying to do through Pledge to Amend is find out who our supporters are who are going to be in office. And then once they are in office, there's more latitude that we have to actually work with them. But while we're in campaign mode in an election year, it's really important that you target every single person running for a race. Even if you're sure what their response is going to be based on everything else that they've said in their campaign, it doesn't matter. You still need to make sure that you are addressing the same questions to everyone. And this is important because Move to Amend is a 501c3 and C4 organization, and as such, we legally cannot do what's called electioneering. And so down the road, it may make sense for us to actually form a political action committee, in which case then we can actually run people for office, and that is something that we see happening down the road. But in the meantime, we don't think that we need to be there yet, and what's important is that we educate everyone right now, and that we make this issue something that isn't just based on, particular folks that we want. That's not the point of this campaign. The point of this campaign is public education, education for the candidates, and education for the media. And I'll talk in just a little bit about some of the things that we're going to do, and you'll see how it is that those focus really on elevating this issue into elections. That's what we're trying to do. We run Move to Amend all the time, every day, 365 days a year, whether it's like an election year, to really jump on something where, every 2 to 4 years, people are really paying attention to our democracy in a different way than normal. And so we want to take advantage of that opportunity and jump on board. And yeah, these restrictions are only while you're volunteering for Move to Amend. If you are active you can volunteer, on candidate campaigns. You can volunteer with political parties. I'm sure many of you do. But remember that last point, you can't coordinate efforts with a candidate or political parties. You can't say, here I am in the room representing Move to Amend, finding out what your position is on Move to Amend, and then I'm just going to stay here in this room, put on a different hypothetical hat, and then we're going to talk about how I'm going to help you campaign on this issue. We can't do that. So, build a wall of separation, and remember that think of it as our job is to provide this information to all the voters of where folks are, and it's not about electing people to office. That's not Move to Amend's role in this election right now. And I see some more questions, so we can come back to some of those if folks still have them at the end. So there are 3 strategies that we're using in this campaign. The first is a voter pledge. So what the purpose of the voter pledge is, it's a chance to educate the public and bring them into the campaign, pledge to amend and move to amend in general. It's a method to apply pressure to candidates and elected officials. We can show this many people in your district or in your city have signed the voter pledge. And it elevates the issue because ultimately what this needs to be is a litmus test for voters. It needs to be that, the same way that people care, fundamentally, what is your position on abortion? What is your position on gun control? We want to say, what is your position on corporate personhood, and have it just come right to the fore and it be a hotbed issue. So that's where we're working towards and where we're trying to go. So the voter pledge says, and this is for voters to sign, I pledge to vote for local, state, and federal candidates who support the movement to amend the United States Constitution to firmly establish that money is not speech and that human beings, not corporations, are persons entitled to constitutional rights. So that should sound familiar. It's mirrored on our petition or our motion to amend. And so really this is just another opportunity to bring people in to move to amend. When people sign that voter pledge, we will tag them in our database and we will know who signed it, and then we'll be able to tell folks who are either in office later or during the campaign of Pledge to Amend that this many voters supported their campaign. Or I'm sorry, this many voters have pledged to not vote for anyone who doesn't take the candidate pledge, and so that obviously provides them an opportunity to think, maybe I should make sure I get all those votes or don't lose them. And so that's the purpose. For the voter pledge, it's the most straightforward, simple piece. So you can send it out to everyone and anyone you know. Anyone can participate in it. You can carry paper sign-ups with you during the campaign, and then in terms of really getting it out there, you can use it to table at community events, farmers markets, but also candidate forums and campaign opportunities, Labor Day picnics, or other things happening this fall that where people are talking about elections, candidate events even. You can find out if you can table at candidate events and bring that voter pledge anytime you're tabling. If folks want to sign the petition, sign the voter pledge in addition to the Move to Amend petition, that is totally fine. And we will keep track of both, so people can do both. And honestly, after Pledge to Amend, when we go to elected officials and say this many supporters in your, of your voters are on board, we would add both of them together. Or make sure that, we're not duplicating, because really these are people who support Move to Amend. But it's, again, kind of tapping into this election year moment and getting people excited around something that they're already going to be thinking of. So the tools that we'll provide for the voter pledge are a pledge online, which is already up. There's a little kink that I noticed today that I need to talk to our database folks about, but it's there. It's just not showing the names. And then we'll put up a petition that you can download, just like the petition, the motion that we have, and you can choose which one you want to use, and then talking points for you when you're tabling with folks. So the next thing is candidate questionnaire / candidate pledge. We've rolled these into one. And the purpose for this is to elevate our issue, incumbents and challengers. It's an opportunity to educate the candidates and elected officials, and once the different candidates are elected, we can use their pledge and their responses to the questionnaire to hold them accountable and basically follow up and say, okay, now what are you going to do about what you said you support? So the questionnaire has 4 points. First is mirrors the voter pledge. It says that I support amending the Constitution. I won't read all this, but to address Move to Amend's points. And then the second point is I will use my office to support the movement to amend the Constitution by passing resolutions, proposing legislation, and publicly speaking out about the need for this amendment. And then the next questions are open-ended, so those are yes, no. And then the next ones are, how are you going to use your public office to end corporate constitutional rights and big money in politics? So, if they've answered yes to 2, the question is, well, what are they specifically planning to do? And then number 4, what is your position on Citizens United, the Citizens United case? So this is our goal to kind of, this is our attempt to get folks on record in a very clear and succinct way, and at the same time give them an opportunity to let us know what it is that they're going to do. And obviously some people might, really think hard about that, and some people might put a little simpler answers, and that tells the voter something in terms of how committed they are. So when you use this candidate pledge, it's going to be really important that you pass it on to all of the people running for a race. So this is, in broad strokes, kind of how you would go about using this tool. You would decide which races that you're going to be targeting. So, for example, you might say, we're going to actually send this to every single person running for office in our jurisdiction, city, state, federal office. You also could say, we don't have capacity for that. We're going to take these particular races, and we're just going to go for everybody running for city council. And you would want to weigh that in with what else you've got going on. This is more to folks who are already part of groups that are in motion, are Move to Amend affiliates, in terms of, are you looking to introduce language in the state, and you really want to make sure that you get some relationships with people who are running for state office, because that is in keeping with what you want to do next year, for example. So again, it's one of these things is, how do we strategically build power? And we think about, which races to target based on where it is that we want to go next. So you need to wait until the filing period has ended, which normally happens in August sometime. It depends on your community and which race. But you want to get a sense of everybody who has come in by the deadline, so you know everyone who's running. And you can find that information by contacting either your local elections department, or the equivalent at the state is normally the Secretary of State or the Federal Elections Commission, and you can get candidate information. It's public, some contact information for everyone who's running for office. And then you want to compile that all together and send a letter inviting the candidates to participate in the questionnaire or the pledge. And again, it's really important that you contact everyone and give everyone a fair chance. So everyone has to receive, that letter has to be sent at the same time to everybody, and it's important that you give them enough time to actually meaningfully respond. They might need to do some research. They might not have ever heard of this before. And so there also will be some information that you can send to give them, so they're not all on their own to do that research. And then you want to make sure to give follow-up calls, because especially folks who are running for higher offices have a lot going on. They get a lot of these questionnaires. You want to make sure it doesn't slip through the cracks, so you want to give a follow-up call and keep on doing that until you actually reach someone and clarify for sure when the deadline is, and get their confirmation that they're going to do it, is what your goal is. And they can also, so they'll be able to respond to the questionnaire online through our website, or you'll send them a paper copy as well. So depending on how they respond, you might need to compile the results so that it's all in one place. And then you also want to actually decide this before step 6. You want to decide it earlier, but the next thing you would do is publish and promote the results. And so it is important that you think about that ahead of time. What kinds of things are we going to do? So to give you an example, the organization that I represent on the Move to Amend Coalition, Democracy Unlimited, we did a local candidate questionnaire and pledge in 2010, and also 2009 and 2008. And we took out an ad in our local paper that said, find out what the candidates think about democracy and corporate power issues, and directed them to a link on our website. And then we also had a printout that we used when we tabled to give voters information for where the candidates stand. So we also sent a press release. So those are some of the things, and you can get creative and maybe think of some other ways to get the word out, because you're not just trying to get the candidates to weigh in and think about this, then you want to get it out to the voters. So the tools that we'll give you to do the candidate questionnaire and pledge are the questions, and the link to the online form that people can fill out. We'll give you a sample letter to send and a script for those follow-up calls, and then a template for a handout that you can make for voters, and a sample press release as well to announce what the results are. And you could also send a press release to announce that you're doing the questionnaire, which might make it more likely that people respond, because then, you know, it's out there that people want to know what the answer is. So the last strategy that we'll employ for this Pledge to Amend campaign is bird dogging. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this than some of the others because this isn't something that everyone's familiar with doing, although I think almost everyone is actually familiar with some examples of this happening. So the purpose is to do the same thing as the pledge. These same points are on there. But in addition to educating the candidates and really targeting, getting them pinned down on where they stand, there's also a component of elevating the issue in the media and to the public that is involved with bird dogging. So this is kind of like, you know, the critical piece that we really hope that everyone at a minimum does this bird dogging, because this is potentially the most exciting element of this campaign. And you can pick and choose any of these or do all of them with your group. So here's a picture of, who's this? Mitt Romney, right? And this is the last presidential election. Mitt Romney was at the Iowa State Fair, and it actually turns out that there were Move to Amend supporters at that fair, and they actually kind of went about it in a style kind of heckling bird dogging, targeted him. It was actually a pretty small event, so they were able to, you know, really get his attention and started arguing with him about whether or not corporations are people. And if you were all, you know, in the room, I'd ask you to raise your hands to let me know if you know this story. I guess that probably everybody does, because it went viral. It went, Colbert still jokes about it, Stephen Colbert, so does The Daily Show. And we all know the punchline is that ultimately he was so frazzled that he said, "Corporations are people, my friend," in a very kind of exasperated and off-message way. And it became a whole component of his campaign that actually dogged him until the very end. So a bird dog, it runs ahead of the hunters and flushes out the birds. And so we're flushing out where somebody really stands on something. That's what bird dogging at its best is about. And you want to make sure that you have a way to document it in the moment, not just, oh, guess what happened at this forum, let me tell you about it, but here's a video of this person either giving a very inspiring and articulate reason for why we need the Move to Amend, or totally ending up with egg on their face in Romney's case, and really making it clear to a lot of voters where he stands and how out of touch he was with a lot of folks. So you mostly want to do this at public candidate forums, although sometimes you can do it at a candidate's own event. But remember, a critical component is the public education and kind of the pressure and spotlight, and then also that you want to do it where media is going to be. So that's where candidate forums really are the best. Because ideally what happens if you do this really successfully is that you start off with asking the questions, and you can especially do this in local races or regional races. And then it starts to be that everywhere this person shows up, there's these questions coming up. And ideally what happens is the media starts to pick up on that, and then they start to actually ask the question. Well, voters seem very concerned about money in politics and the power of corporations. What is your response to that? And so that's something that you know that you nailed it if you can get the media to pick up on it. But that might depend on your media market and what is happening in your community, how good your press is. And so that's not the standard that everyone needs to be held to. But if you can pull that off, then you have nailed a bird dogging campaign. But short of that, you can be the media, and you can be there with the camera, and then you can do like they did in Iowa, where there really wasn't that much media, but that we're going to cover it until a YouTube video went out, and then it became something that media started talking about. So to that end, you want to be at all of the forums if possible, And ideally, you have different people asking the questions, so it doesn't just seem like, oh, there's that guy who has that one pet issue, old Bob who lives on K Street, but rather, wow, this is coming from everywhere, people of all different ages, races, backgrounds, locals, people who are new to town, diversity all over the map cares about this. It's coming from every direction, and so you want to help kind of play into that. And so how many candidate forums there will be is going to depend on your community. And so a whole component of doing bird dogging is actually that you have to set up a team of folks. It could be one person, might just be a pair of folks who actually track where the candidates are going to be. But the candidates are going to do some of that work for you because they want people to know where they're going to be. So most of the time they'll have their forums and their scheduled events and things like that on their website that you can find. So that's why it's important to first pick which races you're going to do, not just, scattershot everything, but figure out what you have capacity for, and then say, okay, we're going to do this really well, and we're going to have somebody who's responsible for tracking and, look at the calendar every day so that when there's something new that pops up, we are ready to go. And so that's a whole component of, part of what you need to have on your team. So you find out where they're going to make their appearances. I got a little ahead of myself here by monitoring their websites, get on their email list, even if they're people that you would never vote for ever, but just so that you're, tracking them. You can also call their staff or their offices and find out, and then make sure that you're combing the papers. And increasingly also local blogs are a good place to go. So get your group together, decide kind of, who's going to do what. Some people, doing the actual question asking is not for you. And so that's okay. You could maybe play the role of helping with some of this research and pinning folks down or holding the camera. But it's important that you have some folks who are ready to do it. And it's very exciting when you actually, get your question and you get to pin them down and all of that. So make sure that you, have some of everything in your group. And you also, want to not just have, again, that one person who's doing this. You need multiple people who are ready and available to ask questions and who get prepped on it. So you want to practice your strategy in advance. You could even role play, write down the questions you intend to ask. We actually have some examples that we'd like you to ask, but as we talk about in the materials, if you're going to do it in a more sophisticated way, you can also kind of evolve with the campaign because politicians and good candidates are going to be pretty good at kind of giving you a vague answer that doesn't really answer it. So you might need to kind of, try one route and then kind of come back again if you didn't get what you really needed. And so if you need to do that, you might need to adjust the questions a little bit and play with it. But make sure you prepare and don't come up on the fly with what questions you're going to ask. Go into each forum knowing this is the question I'm going to ask, and this is the follow-up question that I'm going to ask if I don't get the answer that I want. Or maybe I'm just going to ask it again. You didn't really answer my question. Can you say, do you support a constitutional amendment, et cetera? If you're at a forum, a public event, you want to get there early, get good seats, be throughout the room. Don't all sit in a group. It can be tempting to all sit together, but you want to be all over the room. And when they go to open it up to questions, you want to put your hand up first. Like basically you want to, see kind of Jedi style when they're about to go and put your hand up first because chances are that people are likely to call on whichever hand they see first. So just jump right in there. And then another thing is that lots of times the questions will come on like cards or something like that, and they actually won't have the hands. And so, that's another reason to have multiple people there so you can have the question being asked a bunch of times, and then people will say, oh, this issue is important to a lot of people. We'll make sure it gets in the queue. But if your question doesn't get asked, or even if it does, you can still do follow-up too. As the person is leaving, go for the handshake line and the photo opportunities, and I would do that in a way that gives the impression that you're, signing up, you're walking up to really, give them support and with a big smile, not like a grimace, like I'm going to nail you, but like, wow, that was great, because they're inclined to kind of walk towards you and be excited about meeting somebody who's positive. And then do not let go of that hand until you get your question answered. Just keep on holding it. Yep, shaking, holding, and then asking. And then you want to try to make sure you get quoted. So speak to the press with statements. One thing that I've seen people do is actually to hand the question that they ask to a reporter and say, here was my question. That's something when they go home with their notes, they'll have, your question right there. You might also provide some information, but be ready for the element of the press, because, again, they're a key piece of all of this. And then publicize your efforts and results. We'll have a place on our site where you can upload videos and also kind of report in what is happening as you're doing these bird dogging efforts. And you then also want to put it out to your community. So we'll have a press release example that you can use as well. So in summary, you got to know where they stand ahead of time, kind of gear your questions for what you're, if you do your research, you'll know whether somebody's more likely to sidestep or whether they're going to adamantly oppose what you're saying or whether they're going to, be all about it. And to that end, you want to ask the same question of everybody, but you want to have that stuff in mind and kind of figure out what you're trying to do. Be really assertive. If you, watch that Mitt Romney video, for example, those folks were relentless. They did not let up and got him off his game. So you want to get in line, raise your hand first, really make sure, don't be a wallflower on this one. You want your folks who are excited and ready to jump out there and who want to see their names in the paper. It's also important to be polite, I think, especially if you're targeting local or state offices. Federal offices, maybe it's a little bit bigger, but in general, it's easier to dismiss folks if they're rude. So obviously the Romney hecklers were actually a little bit rude, but I would say that for our campaign and our purposes, it will serve us better if you're polite and you actually work on getting the answer and not necessarily just trying to trip them up. And be direct. Don't give a long explanation. Leave it to them to squirm a little bit. If they don't know the answer, let them figure out how to say that, and then that can be part of your follow-up. Here's a card, here's a brochure. I'd appreciate it if you would do some research on this, and then I will follow up because I'd like to know your position. But if you don't know about it yet, I'll give you some time to figure it out, and I'll be back at the next forum. And then be real specific about your question. And we, again, have created some questions that we think are good ones that will make it harder to wiggle out of. So the tools that we have are the questions that you can utilize, some best practices and tips which are up on our site for bird dogging, a place where you can upload videos, and a sample press release. And then just the last piece about this whole thing is, we're focusing a lot on corporate constitutional rights because we actually think that that issue is a little bit less known to folks, and it is the piece that we see, maybe getting not brought up by others, and so it's our job to do it. But Move to Amend is also about getting big money out of elections or making clear that money is not speech. And so it's important to note and remember that election time is when the problem we're trying to address will be illustrated, right? So maybe not in every race, but certainly if you are in a community where money is being spent heavily, and that's maybe relative, but we are seeing everywhere campaigns costing more and more money. So doing the research and then publishing the figures to show, how much did it take to run for city council 10 years ago versus today? And what does that mean in terms of whether these offices are accessible to working people and what people need to prioritize? Are they prioritizing talking to voters? Are they prioritizing getting money? And if they're prioritizing getting money, they're probably looking for quick, big checks rather than a bunch of little checks, right? And so all of that means that people are going to be more beholden. So pointing that out and backing it up with the research. And in a lot of instances, a lot of the money, especially for local races, is publicly accessible and available. And then taking that and publishing op-eds and letters to the editor, to talk about how much is being spent. Again, you don't want to use this as an opportunity to say, so-and-so is spending millions of dollars and so-and-so is not, so vote for so-and-so and also move to amend. That is not what this campaign is about. That is electioneering. But just talking about how, like I said before, how much more expensive races have become and talking in generalities about the implications and saying, this much is being raised here and this much is being raised here. And then you could also send press releases after campaign filing announcements. Most of the time, at least here in our community, there's always local stories after the campaign filing reports come out, and candidates will sometimes give, the press will call candidates and ask for statements, but you could also be there and say, this is Move to Amend's take on what we're seeing with these races. And if you're proactively offering the media a different angle and a local quote, that's the kind of thing that they would love to pick up. So the support that we will provide you through this process is that all of these materials are either on the Move to Amend website now, or they will be very shortly. There's a couple things we still need to finish up. We will have monthly conference calls on the third Wednesday of every month. Sorry about that phone. There's no one here to answer it. Third Wednesday of every month at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 Eastern, just like the time tonight, to check in and see how it's going. Hear some stories from what others are doing, what's going well, troubleshoot any issues that you're having, and kind of reiterate what the tools are, make sure you know where to find them, etc. And then so we'll do that every month starting next month, and then in November after the election, we'll have our last call where we'll do some evaluation of the campaign, figure out how to do it better, and where to go from here. And then there are also affiliation materials to help you start a group to work on this campaign beyond the Pledge to Amend. So work on this campaign meaning Move to Amend beyond the Pledge to Amend campaign and keep it going after Election Day. So I saw that there was a question about how do I get involved with a Move to Amend group to, not just do this by yourself. So there's information on the very last slide about how you can get started with a group if there's not one in your community. And if you go to our site and go to MTA Coalition on the top, it's on the left-hand side, and look at the list of local affiliates. You can also click on the link, the little button that says Find Move to Amend Near Me, and you can see where the closest affiliate is. If there's not a group near you, you can get one started, and we can help you with that. We can connect you with other Move to Amend supporters who have already signed the motion that you could invite to a kickoff meeting to launch this, or you could plug in with a group that already exists. And you could also just invite your friends and do it with your friends as well. But we'd be happy to connect you with the potential other supporters who are already Move to Amend folks who maybe haven't gotten active yet and have been just waiting for somebody else to kick it off and as an excuse to plug in. So let's see what kind of questions we've got here, Shara. Are there any that you want to tease to the fore that you've noticed as we've gone by? Some of them I tried to answer in my presentation.
Yes, there was a question from Joy in Kentucky regarding requesting people to make a pledge that if a candidate is not willing to participate in Pledge to Amend, that people won't vote. So the question is whether or not we are asking if there are no candidates willing to take the pledge.
Well, the way that this will be kind of more clear, I was going to upload the example that Democracy Unlimited used when we did something similar some years ago. But we basically asked everybody who was running for every local race, so tax controller up to county supervisor, the questions, and then we had just like a spreadsheet, and we said, they could answer yes, no, or refuse to answer. And that was the way that we did it. And so there was maybe one race where nobody answered, and it was all refused to answer. Most races, there were at least some folks who said yes or no to our questions. And we took it as, if folks ignore the issue, then that tells the voter something too. So you're just basically making it available to everybody and then showing what the response is. And then after the election, I would say that your Move to Amend group has some strategic planning to do to think about, how do we either bring it back to folks again once they're in office, or potentially look at running some other people for office down the line. And again, that would be, currently not as Move to Amend, but that's where we need to get to. And I'll tell a quick anecdotal story too. Here, our congressional district here in Northern California, our Congress member originally ran for office 4 years ago, and his campaign, he said that he opposed Citizens United, but he didn't think that we should go as far as amending the Constitution to abolish all corporate constitutional rights. And our Move to Amend affiliates in this congressional district, we have several counties, and so there were 4 or 5 different affiliates, spent the last couple years lobbying him, educating him, and now he is a co-sponsor of Move to Amend's amendment and really realized that, he, when he was running for office, didn't understand the issue as deeply as he does now because of the education that we did, and so he came on as a full supporter. And so this is a process, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so first we need to assess where people are, and then based on that assessment, we need to figure out how to move forward and either move them or get them out of the way.
Great.
Did you see any other questions?
Yes, there are a few more. Hopefully we have time to reach all of them. The next question has to do with volunteering time from Move to Amend. Joel from Denver wants to know if we can donate in-kind time as a in-kind donation for Move to Amend. To
Move to Amend, I take it he means, not to candidates, right? I mean, certainly folks can individually be involved in campaigns as volunteers. In terms of Move to Amend, we're a nonprofit organization, and so that time doesn't need to be recorded. And actually, all of our local affiliate folks are volunteers. And many of us on the national team, Shar and I are both staff, but many of our colleagues on the national team are volunteers as well. Move to Amend really is a mostly volunteer engined effort. So absolutely, you can put in as much time as you want, and you don't need to worry about it being an in-kind donation. That's a specific thing when we're talking about elections that is part of election law, and so not relevant for nonprofits.
What about for candidates? It appears that that he's been donating some of his time to local candidates. Is he able to do that and volunteer for Move to Amend?
Yeah, you can do that. Just make clear, when you're in which role, and be very careful about, not in a smaller community. There's an element where, for example, in my community, anything I do, people know that I work with Move to Amend. But I also have a political life. I'm actually an elected official myself, and I have, full agency over my time as well. So if you are volunteering on campaigns in a professional capacity, like say you're a bookkeeper professionally and then you are a volunteer bookkeeper for a campaign, this is not really Move to Amend specific, but you will probably want to check your local election law or your state election law just to make sure that wouldn't need to be an in-kind donation. But again, that's not a Move to Amend issue. That's just to make sure that you don't get yourself into trouble.
Okay, great. We have another question. Would Move to Amend support an amendment that does not reform campaign finance, but does not say anything that corporations aren't people? Can you say that again?
Yeah, sure. I think I got it, but...
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting lots of them all at once here.
I think that I got it. So the question is, would we support a just abolishing corporate constitutional rights amendment rather than both points? Is this what I think what the question is?
So my understanding of the question is that would we support an amendment that addresses campaign finance but does not address corporate constitutional rights?
Got it. Thanks for the clarification. Well, the answer is no. Move to Amend has actually pledged to our supporters that we won't address any amendment measures that don't address both parts. Corporations are not people, and money is not speech. And we've actually made that commitment so that folks can count on us for clarity and to kind of wade through all the different proposals. And it's also, not just a purist thing. We really genuinely believe that both points need to be addressed, and the most strategic way for both to be ensured to happen is to put them together. And we don't trust that if we separated them out and just did campaign finance first, the corporate constitutional rights would be addressed. And we see a lot of evidence for that with a lot of the groups and politicians in D.C. who, really are not willing to make a commitment on corporate constitutional rights, but use the rhetoric of corporations are not people to advocate campaign finance only. So the Senate bill, the Udall Amendment, SJR 19, move to amend, does not support. And we have been lobbying everybody who is a co-sponsor to amend it. And we also don't see that amendment really actually going anywhere after the vote in probably September. This is an election year attempt to distinguish Democrats from Republicans, and it brings the issue to the fore, so we're using it to point out why it's got to address both points, but it isn't really going to get any traction in Congress. So we're focusing on pledge to amend as kind of the best strategy for using an election year to our ends.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, do we have any affiliation with the Occupy movement?
Not officially, in the sense that Occupy is a very organic, decentralized movement. However, if you look at Move to Amend's website and look at our endorsers, you will see dozens of Occupy groups on that list. There are a number of Move to Amend affiliates that formed out of Occupy groups, and to kind of continue on the spirit of Occupy after the initial spark became Move to Amend groups. And so we definitely have a strong connection with Occupy folks. We've been at the Occupy National Gatherings by invitation every year since the Occupy uprising. So there's a lot of collaboration and synergy, but I don't know that Occupy officially endorsed anyone, really. So as close as you could get, I would say Move to Amend's there, and we wouldn't try to, move Occupy into becoming the kind of group that would do that. That's really not their role, I don't think, and they serve their decentralized role, quite well. And yes, we will have folks at the Occupy National Gathering in Sacramento. We have a Sacramento affiliate, and one of the lead coordinators there is actually one of the lead organizers of the gathering. And so our Sacramento folks will be there.
Great, thank you. The next question, can a constitutional convention be limited to this one amendment, or does it open up?
For me, you cut out, Shara, but I saw what the question was. So the question, let me just repeat it. Can a constitutional convention be limited to just this one amendment, or does it open it up to everything? Well, legal scholars and constitutional scholars, there's a lot of debate about it. But our perspective is that that's a question of political will and political capacity. The Constitution is not explicit, and so what it really comes down to is do we have a movement that is strong enough to make it so that it is just about one issue? And then also one other really important thing to remember about a constitutional convention is that any proposals that come out of a convention, say it does kind of expand in scope, still need to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So it's not like the convention in and of itself can just change the Constitution. There's still the provision to ratify, just like if it comes from Congress. So our perspective on the convention is that really that's a fork in the road that we haven't reached yet about whether to abandon Congress or go for a convention. And we right now need to focus on doing the education and building capacity so that if it is a convention route, we can make sure that's the kind of convention we would want. And if it's a congressional route, that we build the capacity to force Congress to act. And right now, the work that we need to do is the same in either case. So we can cross that bridge a bit later.
Okay, great. Thank you, Caitlin. Next question, at what point do you give up on educating a candidate or an elected official?
I would say that kind of depends on your capacity and what your agenda is. But, you know, I think that at the end of the day, more important than having a whole bunch of people in office on our side is actually that we have millions of the public on our side. And I think it was Sam Rayburn in Texas was a legislator there, and he had a quote, "When I feel the heat, I always see the light." And there's an element of, you know, elected officials are in this unique position where they rely, even despite all of the money, which currently makes them very heavily rely on that money, but they still rely on our vote as well. And so not to be Pollyannish about it, but I think that what's most important is building our numbers with the public. And so it's not so much abandoning an elected official or a candidate, but rather can you use their unwillingness to move as an education opportunity for your community or the voters? And that's kind of a case-by-case thing. But there are also a lot of other strategies to employ to do that education, and this is certainly not the only one. This is just one of the many campaigns that we have going on right now.
Great. Next question. Is it moved to a men's position that all money is not speech or only big money is not speech?
Well, our position is that money is not speech. And so if money is not speech, then that means, what that really means is that spending money in elections is not protected under the First Amendment, which is a relatively new legal construct invented by the Supreme Court in the 1970s. And so if we remove that doctrine and that construct, what it allows us to do is decide what is an appropriate amount of money in elections, what are appropriate places for that money to come from, and that might vary depending on our state or the kinds of races that we're talking about. And so really what we're trying to say is get to the fundamental platform upon which that idea of we cannot regulate campaign spending comes from, and if we pull that rug out, then that allows us to have a debate and a conversation, and it becomes a political question, as it should be. What is the role of private money, if any, in the political process? And that's something that, you know, I have opinions on, you all probably have opinions on, but it allows it to become a political question, whereas right now it's just off the table. It supposedly is, you know, a holy right protected by the First Amendment, which again was just invented by the Supreme Court. So that's what we need to address so that we can have that critical question of how much money and where can it come from.
Great, thank you. So how are we doing on time here?
We're doing all right. What the email said to everyone is that this call would be 60 to 90 minutes, depending on how many questions we've got. So there's probably time for a few more. We could maybe go to 6:15, 6:20, but we technically could go to 6:30 if folks are really raring.
Okay. Great. So the next question is, what is the importance of linking corporate personhood with campaign finance reform? What are the implications of rolling back the privileges of corporations?
So, Stephen, I would encourage you to poke around our website, because there's, you know, kind of a lot of depth that one could go in to really understand the full implications of corporate constitutional rights. And if you go to the Learn More section and look at recommended reading, you can really see what all the rights are that corporations have been able to get through the courts and what the implications are. But just to kind of try and boil it down in a nutshell, what it means when corporations have constitutional rights, whether we're talking about the First Amendment right to contribute money in elections because money is speech, and to me those are why the two go together. Or we're talking about the Fourth Amendment protection against search and seizure, or the 14th Amendment protection of equal protection. What all of that means is that when communities or states, or sometimes even the federal government, in the case of McCain-Feingold, tries to limit in some way or regulate in a meaningful way corporate excess or corporate behavior, those laws, generally passed by either the legislative process or sometimes even directly by the voters through ballot initiatives, are vulnerable to being overturned in court if a corporation has enough money to sue and make the case that their constitutional rights are being violated. So the reason why the money is speech and First Amendment pieces go together is meaningful campaign finance is completely off the table if corporations have rights and money is speech, because it means that it is walled behind the Constitution, and we the people don't have authority through our government to regulate that behavior, because that's what it means to have a constitutional right. And obviously we really believe in constitutional rights for people. But when we're talking about an entity that is created by government, like a corporation, that has tremendous amounts of privileges that human beings do not have. We can't live forever. We don't have limited liability for our actions. There's tax advantages that corporations have as well. And so all these things that we don't have as individuals, but corporations have, and then they also have on top of that the ability to step outside of our control, out of bounds, by exercising constitutional rights, means that we cannot meaningfully regulate their behavior, and they're outside of our control. And they're not, the idea of constitutional rights is that they're inalienable. They don't actually come from government. They're just recognized by government. We have them because we're alive, because we're human beings. So again, to imbue a creature of the law, if you will, a corporation that wouldn't exist unless the government brought it into existence, completely turns on its head the notion of constitutional rights. And so there's a lot more of kind of cases that show, all these laws that have been overturned by, and it's really only the wealthy corporations who are able to sue and do this. But the implications are that there's all these areas that are now out of bounds of our ability to regulate their behavior. And one critical element is the money is speech piece, too, because if money is speech and corporations have First Amendment rights, then we cannot regulate their behavior in elections, but also there are other ways that corporations use First Amendment rights around labeling and not labeling that we cannot even force them to tell us what harmful products they are selling to us, for example. So that's just some examples. But that could be a whole, 2-hour lecture. So I'd encourage you to check out our website for more info.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. The next question is move to amend coordinating with the Lessig May Day Super PAC.
We are not. We are well aware of Lessig and know him, and he knows us, and we have collaborated together on occasion. We don't really, for us, the strategy of pouring more money into money-driven campaigns is just, it doesn't really fit with what we're about and what we're doing. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the May Day experiment. But right now, we think that it would be more effective to really build a movement and not just try to get, a certain number of people in office. But if they do get those folks in office and those folks are helpful to our ends, then, there's multiple fronts to this struggle. And so we don't see it as it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's kind of a different approach. And Lessig does kind of tend to try a lot of different things. So we'll see if this one sticks and where it goes.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. I have several questions from folks who had a hard time linking up or following the link to access the webinar. So they're wondering when the recording is going to be available so that they can not only hear the presentation, but also hear the Q&A as well.
Yeah, again, my apologies sincerely for the technical difficulties. Luckily, we do have this recording, though, so we'll catch everybody up. And the system normally spits out a finished video like 4 to 5 hours after the event. So as soon as that is done, we will put it up on the Pledge to Amend site, and we will send a link to everybody who was here and who RSVP'd to let you know that that is up. So I would say at the latest tomorrow morning, and If I stay up late, then tonight. And the slides I can put up right after the presentation. So if you go to movetoamend.org/pledge-amend, then you will be able to see the slides at a minimum right now.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. We're just going to take a couple more questions. Does Move to Amend have a position on California's Proposition 49?
Yes, we do. We are supportive. It'll be interesting to see, as you might know, there's a lawsuit. For folks not in California, it is a ballot initiative that was placed on the ballot by our state legislators, and it is a resolution calling for an amendment. And because it addresses and calls for an amendment that would end corporate constitutional rights and money as speech, originally the language was just about money in politics, but it was amended to be broadened to include our full scope, and we were really happy about that. So we are supportive, and we will be having a call with all of our affiliates in August to figure out exactly how our California folks are going to plug in with that ballot initiative.
Great, thank you. The next question is Move to Amend working or teaming up with Represent Us? It seems like we might have some shared values or at least messaging. Is there any plan to work together?
Represent Us, like Lessig, is a player out there that we have collaborated with sometimes and then had kind of different tactics at other times. They are really focusing on their Anti-Corruption Act, which is legislation, and they have really kind of abandoned, at least as far as we can tell for now, any real work or resources into an amendment. So currently we're not partnering with them because they're working on legislation, and I would say it's good legislation. It's as good as you can get if corporations have constitutional rights and money is speech. But we're kind of looking a little bit further down the line, and our commitment has been from day one to do an amendment. And so that's what we're focused on, and when it makes sense to kind of collaborate on rallies and events, then we do. But they also tend to really just be talking about corruption and money in politics and not so much corporate constitutional rights. And from some of the questions here, you know, it's clear that the real implications of this very insidious doctrine invented by the Supreme Court are not understood, and so we don't want to just go the easy route and do the thing that's easier to explain. We think it's really, really critical that people get this corporate constitutional rights business, because in a way, it is actually more fundamental. It goes back further, and it has many more implications beyond just our elections, and so we can't lose that piece.
Great, thank you so much. Other questions. Thank you all so much for such wonderful questions. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking the time to respond to everyone and for everyone keeping your long attention. Caitlin, did you want to say a few last words before we sign off?
Yeah, thanks so much, Shara, for jumping in as moderator there on the questions. Helped a bunch because people did have really great, kind of really detailed ones. So next steps, there's a survey at the end of this webinar, and we'll send it out for folks who had to jump off before we finished, because it includes your feedback on how it went, but also kind of what you need to move forward and what you're thinking that you're going to work on. So please take a moment. It shouldn't take you very long to fill that out. Let us know if you'd like a follow-up call to get started. We really are a grassroots campaign, and our volunteers are critical, and we do everything we can to help you out. That is our job, those of us who work at the national level. So let us help you by letting us know what you need. If next step for you all would be to gather your group to make a plan. So if you already have a group, hold a meeting of your affiliate, go through the materials, and make some of those decisions that you need to about how you're going to do this and what it's going to look like and who's going to do what. If you don't have a group yet, there is a link right there to go to the page on our site to start one, and you can also find out if there's one near you on our website. And one thing to keep in mind is that election season basically kicks off with Labor Day, which is early this year, September 1st. So you will, you want to take this next month basically to get your ducks in a row, and then be ready on Labor Day with whichever components you are using. And don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. We're on California or Pacific time, and we'd be happy to help you out. And we will, again, send you the follow-up. We'll send you the slides from this recording or this event, and also the recording video. And you can find all of that also at movetoamend.org/pledge-amend. And when I close out the call, you'll automatically be taken to the survey link. So again, please remember to do it. And don't apologize, Elizabeth or anyone else, for any questions that were related to education. I see a couple folks saying, oh, sorry, that's the point of making ourselves available. And this is deep stuff. It's been around for a while, and lay people can definitely talk. I'm not a lawyer. You don't need to be a lawyer, but this has been the work shrouded by lawyers and judges, and it's not something that's been made accessible. It's not something you learn in history class in high school or even college. So that's part of the work too, is to get ourselves educated and then take the message out there. So I look forward to working with all of you to do that. And thanks so much for your patience with the technology. And thanks again, Shara, for all your work, and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.